I am very vain. This whole lesson is an idol.
Gosh, seriously?
Everyone say hi.
Hi!
This is going to be posted on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big deal. All right, guys. If you have a notebook, I suggest you take it out. See, you brought it. You're balling. You're on the ball. You got it. All right. Tonight, we're going to talk about our most important relationship. I love PowerPoint. And of course, when I say our most important relationship, I'm talking about our relationship with God through Christ. But before we get into the lesson, it's important to note that our relationship with God is only possible through Jesus. Just like he said in John 14:6, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me." And he is the only way to have a relationship with God because he paid for our sins which had previously separated us from God. So, every good lesson needs a little tape to hold the holes together. And I want to point out, what's tape's job? I know it's a dumb question, but what is the job of tape? It's, thank you, to shut Tommy Knoll's mouth is one end. But the answer I'm looking for is that tape is like a little fat kid with a lollipop, a sticky mess. It's made to stick to one thing, right? All right. So I'm going to take this tape and I'm going to stick it to the music stand. And then I'm going to pull it off. And there's a little bit of gunk on it from the music stand.
Ew.
I'm going to take the tape and I'm going to stick it to the projector stand, rip it off, more gunk, right? And I'm going to take the tape and stick it to the floor and stomp on it. All right? Good. I'm going to remove it. And there is now gunk from the music stand, the projector stand, and the floor on this piece of tape. And it's become pretty useless. The point I want to make here is that if we bounce from a relationship to relationship, we become like this filthy piece of duct tape, unable to stick to what we were meant for. Yeah.
I hate duct
Unable
tape.
to stick to what we were meant to stick to, which is our future husband and wife, because we get so full of gunk, like emotional baggage, other problems that we bring in. I'll just leave that there. But the question remains, like, why do we bounce from relationship to relationship? Maybe you guys have some friends who do this in high school. You know, you always see that guy, he's with a different girl every week. You always see that girl, she's with a different guy every week. You all know one, right? What? It's like, no, that's not like Jeremy. But the reason people do this is because we're all looking for love. Not that we know what love is apart from God. Rather, we've somehow gotten this concept of love that we think love is whatever or whoever makes us feel good. And we substitute love for happiness because we think that love is just something that makes us feel good. This lesson's not about love wholly. But one concept I wanted to point out that Crystal's going to jot down for y'all so you can ask her later is that there's a big difference between I love you, kind of true love, and I love the way you make me feel about myself, which is like when somebody makes us happy. If you want me to repeat that, there's a big difference between I love you and I love the way you make me feel about myself. And most of us have confused the I love the way you make me feel about myself concept for real love. We also do that in our relationship with God. I mean, think about when you're having a bad day or when you're suffering. You know, it really feels like God doesn't love you. I've talked to a lot of people. I talked to the dean of students over at Montclair today who was talking about Christians, even Christians, who think that God doesn't love them just because they're suffering. And we know that's not true. It's just hard to figure that out. So because we often seek after our own happiness, we'll leave God and we'll turn to idols. And even Christians who are sitting here tonight may say, I don't have any idols, my God is God. Guess what? By the end of this, you're going to find out that you might have more idols than you think. So I want to introduce a concept. In the example with the duct tape, the things it stuck to in order to remain happy, like, you know, the table, the floor, all those things were idols. And like the duct tape, we'll stick to different idols because they make us happy. So we're going to talk about tonight lust, idolatry, and self-deification. Oh my. I found that picture of Jeremy online. Well, I'm the hairy one. That's yeah, all right.
We're not in Kansas anymore.
All right, now. The dress. Lust, idolatry, and self-deification. We'll define them in a minute. But I just want you to know that they're all interconnected and often stem from each other. And these are at play in both our relationships as well as other aspects of our lives. And sometimes in our relationships, lust will be rooted in idolatry, and idolatry will be actually rooted in self-deification. And again, we'll define these terms in a minute. But our sin nature, it ends up deceiving us into thinking that we're the gods of our lives. And we like to believe this and follow it because it feels good and meets our needs. Like, for example, say I felt dumb today. I feel dumb often. Sure. You are. All right. Now, if I was feeling dumb today, I'm not. I could make an idol out of something as simple as this lesson. Like, if I used this lesson to promote how smart or how holy or spiritual I was, instead of to glorify God with it, I'd really be turning the whole lesson into an idol to serve myself and boost my ego, right? All right. So before we continue, let's define our terms. Lust. So what is it? Lust is self-satisfaction, a personal inclination that we often confuse for love. Lust is seeking to satisfy your desires. And some common objects of lust are a member of the opposite sex. We'll look at Matt 5:28 in a minute. You could lust after food. You can lust after entertainment. Guys, you can lust after video games. And girls, you could lust after vanity.
Stop it.
Stop it. All right. So let's just read Matthew 5:28, where Jesus said, I say that anyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now here, the type of person that Jesus is talking about, he's describing them as a person who lusts after another person. And they're turning that person into an object to satisfy their lust. And as we learned before, an object that satisfies lust is an idol. All right. And we're just going to read through Romans 1:19 through 25. This is an abridged version, so just pay attention. For what can be known about God is plain to them, Paul's writing about the ancient Israelites. For his invisible attributes have been clearly perceived so that man is without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal men and animals. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served the creation rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So to summarize that, man was in relationship with God, walked with God, and knew God, but they traded in their real living relationship with God for idols because they wanted to serve their desires, their passions, and their lusts. And maybe they didn't like obeying God, and they wouldn't like it because they didn't love Him. So they followed the lusts of their hearts, which led them away from God, thus rejecting God. Now we're going to go into idolatry. So what's an idol? An idol is something that we use in order to fill a lustful, emotional, or physical need. And sometimes we'll even trade God for this thing. In fact, most of the time we'll trade God for this. Some common idols include, but are not limited to, money, status, clothing, sex, the opposite sex, a feeling of security, etc. I just want to point out sex for a minute. One of my friends said something really, really profound. He said that guys will trade love to get sex because they idolize sex, and girls will trade sex to get love because they idolize love. I thought that was a pretty neat thing to point out. Now, the first and second commandments are against idols and other gods. Now, I spent some time at college as a religious studies major, and we studied all the different gods of other religions. And it's funny because every man-made god ended up being identifiable because it was a god that ended up serving man.